May the 4th be with you, as well as other fantasy baseball related things that we will cover tonight. In addition to my humor, we are going to talk about all sorts of listener questions, all sorts of topical things. Episode 158, which is really close to Clint Frazier's average and really close to Rugi Odor's average. It's time for Dinger.
This is Dingers, way more than fantasy baseball. We keep it real when we talk and knock it straight out the park. Let's see the stats. What's the average draft position? What kind of plays you making? Check the wins above replacement. Check the lineups and the points. This I gotta see. What's your path to victory? Are they aiming for a dynasty? Get points going head to head. Please don't do me no favors. We're always watching waivers. Ain't no minor league. This is major. Yeah, Dingers. Let's go.
Whoa, what is happening? Welcome to Dingers, the only fantasy baseball podcast for smart people. It's not just Jesse Winker that wins you championships. That's why week in and week out, we're delivering tips and strategies to help you live that straight up OG lifestyle. Tyler Childs joined again by Robbie Baseball One and special guest Jonathan Mason, who's with us tonight. This is awesome because it's the first time we've done the record in the video, and I screw my own name up so many times in the audio only. So it's so great that everyone gets to see that. It's the best. So Jonathan, welcome to the show. We're going to intro Jonathan. We've fully shifted the way we're going to record our podcast because Zoom keeps screwing up. So we've recorded an episode with Jonathan. We're going to restart the intro. Jonathan is the founder of the Toronto Blue Jays fan club on Clubhouse. As you are all well aware, we are huge Blue Jays homers, and so we've naturally befriended Jonathan. We are members of this group, and we help Jonathan do some things when we can over there on Clubhouse. So Jonathan, welcome to the show on the audio side, and now the video in crystal clear HD.
Yes, thank you for having me, Ty, Robbie. It's a pleasure to be here. Meeting you guys on Clubhouse has been definitely one of the joys of the tail end of this pandemic experience. I think the first time we spoke to each other was the evening of the George Springer signing. So look how far we have come. And I think it's nice to chat with you guys about the team and, the baseball world in general. And I will say, I think the thing that makes me most proud is being a Vladdy Jr. fantasy owner.
Yeah, and that's phenomenal. Robbie was a Vladdy owner. I also was a Vladdy owner. Robbie, do you still have any shares of Vladdy anywhere?
I have one left in a keeper, a 12 team keeper, where you have first, second, and third, and then they have to be one of 5 keepers. So I think Vladdy's a third. I don't remember. We didn't play last year, so he might be a second. But that's the only Vladdy share, non-redraft, that I've got.
Well, and I had to get rid of mine because the offer was just too good. I got Matt Olson, Luis Castillo, James Paxton unfortunately destroyed his elbow, and Yu Darvish back. So that was a trade that I could not say no to.
Oh, right. That was in our real money auction league. That was the money dump from Mark, the Dodger owner, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And then 2 weeks into the season, he's like, who has baseball players?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it, which was phenomenal. I was happy to take it on. I figured Matt Olson was going to bounce back. He has. And I needed pitching, right? That was the big depth issue with that roster was pitching. And, because it's the 8x8 format, pitching matters, pitching plays. And in a short schedule, the way that league is set up, I actually think pitching is a significant advantage over the hitters. So I really liked that strategy, especially with all the injuries we've seen this year. And I think we can all attest to the pain around all of the injuries this year. And I think it leads us into the thing that we like to do to make up for it.
A long time ago, someone decided to put stuff in glass bottles. In some of these bottles, they put juice or milk, and that was stupid. Today, only alcohol and a few other products remain in the containers from the gods. It's time for beers and bourbon, because good advice only comes in a bottle.
Poppin'.
Yeah, I'm still sans bourbon, and I have really classed it up this week with the Coors Banquet. I in the first
I've classed it up.
banquets are
What,
classy.
what are you
Banquets
hitting
are
from the
so
tips
classy.
at the golf course too, Ty? Whoa.
Sorry, do I hit from the tips?
Well, you're drinking your banquet, so you got to go from the tips, right?
You know what? I actually
I
drink
got a
on the golf
little. I got a
course.
little if you want still.
Oh, I might take that off your hands. I
Oh wow,
actually
look at
drink
that. A nice glass bottle there.
That's where the good advice comes from.
That's not what I'm drinking. That's just so everybody knows. I'm showing some Maker's
Yeah.
Mark. I'm not
So,
drinking that.
what episode was that you tried that bottle? Was that the
That
Alex
was
episode?
that was the
Was it-
first one that didn't work. That was
that
SB
was with
Streamer.
Fast, wasn't it?
No, that was
Oh, no,
Michael
it was
Simeone.
Michael. Yeah, basically picture this. Like Robbie opens up his bottle of bourbon and it's just basically had the 5-year-old response like, ew, it's icky. Ugh.
That's not how it was. It was this tastes disgusting and I don't want any of it. But tonight, not disgusting. We've got, let's see, there we go. The Brock Street Brewing Company's Blonde Ale, all natural. These are dudes that started this up. What is it? 4 friends who started this up in 2015. Good for them for still rolling. 4.3%. And I've got enough to get me through the episode. So, Jonathan, you're our guest. What are you drinking?
Yes, I have to say, in the interest of full disclosure, I am speaking to you from the United States. So I'm almost always choosing from some sort of craft beer. Tonight, I have a Fat Tire Amber Ale. I'm enjoying it very well.
I like the ambers.
I'm actually finding it going down quite smoothly. It's from the New Belgium Brewing Company. Which seems like it might be, a small craft brewery, but is very likely owned by Anheuser-Busch or Coors. So I will get back to you on that information. But this Fat Tire Amber is going down very nicely.
Why do I know that name? New Belgium is a fairly large brewer, is it not?
Exactly. I think that's right.
Where are they located? Is this?
This one is, it's
Fort
Fort Collins. Exactly.
I knew that.
Exactly.
So I knew it because that's where one of my guys that works for our team is in Fort Collins. So I have been to New Belgium Brewer.
And it would appear that we're not actually drinking that far apart, you being on the banquet beer tonight.
That's right. I mean, the mountains are silver, so it's nice and frosty, I think. Either that or they just chose that color in the printing, one of the two.
Well, and we know the Coors Light is the one that has the color effect, right? When it's cold, the mountains
That's
are blue,
exactly right. That's the story of my college years.
So we were actually teasing that same guy. He's going to the Rockies game tomorrow with a supplier. And basically, I told him I needed a photo of him with a Coors Light at Coors Field holding some Rocky Mountain oysters, right?
Oh,
and then
I should get
just the caption that says "This tastes like balls." Would be hilarious.
I should forward him my resume. Maybe he can drop it off with the front office with the Rockies.
Yeah, I saw that tweet the other night. That was pretty funny.
Because they are still hiring. They're looking to hire, and
they hired their scouting director as an interim. Actually, so he was announced either yesterday or this morning. I can't remember.
That's temporary. I'm still waiting for the callback, but
they're trying to figure out how to approve your visa. That's really what it is.
Right. Yeah. I have worked in the States previously. And the warrant that was out for my arrest in British Columbia, that's all in the past now. That was related to an ID. We don't need to talk about it. Anyway, let's talk about some baseball things because that's what everybody cares about. So we're going to go through news and notes with a couple little quick fires, and then we've got some listener questions. And this, for everybody's information, will be the third time since April 22nd when we recorded the first try at this listener question episode that we are going to do this. And tonight on StreamYard, it's going to work, and we believe in it. So the Blue Jays, after a loss last night, are sitting 14-13. Healthy Blue Jays, which we now know we don't have, just to show how dated this is, losing Springer again and Kirk. Are they good Blue Jays? This is a tough month. They have the West Coast trip right now. Last night, Montas looks solid. We'll talk about Mats later. How are you guys, Jonathan, Ty, feeling about Los Blue Jays right now?
Ty, maybe I'll go first on this one. And I think for me, my feelings about the Blue Jays probably are just about the same as the record. 14 and 13. So I would say my feelings are mixed, but a little more positive than negative. And I think, the Blue Jays have been a story of a lot of different extremes. I mean, the bullpen ERA has been, extreme, I think, beyond our expectations when you consider the injuries we suffered at the beginning of the year. And up until very recently, it was the lineup that was a bit of a disappointment and a concern. And I think lately, those concerns have kind of flipped. Teoscar has returned to the lineup. We've seen Randall Grichuk, continue with production that I don't think any of us expected. And now,
I did, Jonathan.
And well, I appreciate that. It's only recently I've started to, defer to you for that kind of insight. But early in the season, I was looking to trade Grichuk to the NL somewhere.
Well, I think everybody wanted him just off the Jays roster, right?
For a second, did Robbie just try to hijack my Randall Grichuk train?
No,
did that just happen?
I said Ty did.
Okay,
I said
sorry.
Ty.
I did miss that. Okay, yeah, I've been on Rick Grichuk for 3 years waiting for this moment.
And Grichuk with a 296 average, 829 OPS headed into play tonight.
Exactly. And I think that's the story of the ball club, right? You can look to areas where we've outperformed our expectations. Some of them we just discussed, but I think it's coming to a point now where, you're starting to see some cracks in the bullpen. We're seeing Steven Matz come down to life. And I just kind of want to, throw it back to the two of you. Mixed but positive is where I would say I'm not really sure what to say about the ball club right now.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think there's lots to look forward to. It's still very early in this season. There's still lots that can happen, good and bad. And I think at the end of the day, like, we're gonna acquire pitching. Like, that's a foregone conclusion. We have the things to trade. It's just a matter of who decides they're out of it the earliest. Is it going to be Colorado? Is it going to be Cincinnati? Is it going to be Milwaukee? Wait, no, they don't have any pitching. Who is it going to be that needs to give us their pitching? Like, as long as we're smart about it, we should be able to act early, but with a healthy rotation, which we haven't seen yet. This team is very, very, very good, right? And I think that's what we're waiting for. The bats have been slow to get started. We've missed Springer and Teoscar, obviously. So I think those two healthy, we're starting to see what that does to that lineup, right? Vladdy went, 3 for 4 last night, right? I mean, you're starting to see what the kids can do with a little bit of protection built in there. And so that's what I'm excited for. Like, I think we're one starting pitcher away because I think we're going to see Manoah at some point here in the summer, whether it's June 1, June 5, July 1, that's yet to be seen. But I think this team has some length to it. The bullpen, as we've talked about all offseason and last year, is delivering, right? And if there's one thing beyond the drafting, beyond the scouting that this front office has done unbelievably well, is build bullpens. And they've done it year over year and with nothing, right? They spent no money on it. And I think
until this year with Yates, and of course Yates gets hurt, and that's the only one. That's the only expense that's been, I think, maybe over $3 million. I think that might be right. But to go on with your point, Ty, it's pitching related. That was our concern before the year started. We didn't care that there were more MLB caliber outfielders than there were positions available. We had concerns about where Rowdy would play, and it looks like that's going to be Buffalo for a bit. And then we'll see what happens, as far as bringing him back up when he's impactful. And thank goodness tonight, MILB play returned for the first time since 19. So we are going to start to see those guys, those chips move around. And for us, unfortunately, we kind of need to wait on trading at least personally, trading minor leaguers for the next month, because I want to start to see some stats accumulate at where all these guys are. Last week, the rumor was Jason Dominguez was going to be sent to high A with the Yankees. Now he's sticking back in development. So he's not going to report anywhere. And at best, I guess it's going to be a low A. But the two worst teams in baseball right now, Ty, as far as rosters that might be willing to strip if we were to get into early trades, would be Detroit and Colorado. And I bring them up specifically. Well, not Detroit. They don't have the pieces that you would necessarily want back, but Colorado and John Gray is a tie prediction that I love. And I'm going to talk about John Gray in a moment here, but that's just one thing. So good Blue Jays. So you got the idea. We are as confident as their record has been. So we're okay, but not great. Now, moving to Luis Robert and my redraft season, which are both now on ice thanks to his injury, which looks to be at least 3 months. My goodness, this and for the White Sox too, right? Him and Eloy, this is not the way they had built the club, and I don't know. I think Lind has 2 years left on his deal. Like, I don't know that they would look to reset the table at all. I think they're just going to try to push through, but that's really rough on Hahn and everybody there. Thor has faced human beings in his Tommy John recovery. That's great to see. Kershaw had a big blow up today. He'll be fine next time out, but 2 of his 7 starts have left him with a 4-3 record, and 2 of those 7 starts have been poor. Is this time, Ty, do you think, to try a buy low on Kershaw?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can ever buy Kershaw, you should, right? I mean, the days of paying an arm and a leg to get him are in the past. But as we talked about in the first time we tried to record this, like the numbers since his last Cy Young are still very good. You know, the last start
Sub 3 ERA over that. Yeah.
2.36,
right.
right? Like that's very good. You know, it's dwarfed by what DeGrom has done, but still very, very good. And for whatever reason, people are forgetting that Kershaw is a Hall of Famer, and that he can still get things done on a very, very good team. He doesn't need to allow 0 runs like he did when he first came up. Like, if you allow less than 3 as a Dodger, it's pretty much a lock for a victory. So I think that's something that, you know, people need to get aware of. And I think getting him, I saw an interesting stat the other day talking about pitching down and into right-handed hitters, and Kershaw far and away blew the league away, even his own roster away, in terms of, you know, pounding down and in. And it's the quality of pitch selection that he has, and the limited use of the slider is so effective down and into that righty, because the hook's obviously the curveball is obviously the pitch he's hung his hat on, but fastball command, slider down and into a righty on top of the hook, and fastball away, it's a great set. And that, because it's the 12-6, that's his hallmark. I always like those types of guys, as long as the curve is still effective. We're seeing it with Adam Wainwright. I like the longevity of those kind of guys' careers, because they don't rely on the same things. They can get cheap outs on weak contact, as well as the swing and miss with that pitch.
Yeah, keeping batters off balance for sure. So yeah, so definitely I would try to approach whomever is interested in dealing, because the numbers, although they still look fine, I think it's 293 average right now, and 4-3 record in the 5x5 format, he's going to appear to be less dominating than he actually is, you know, save for those 2 starts. John Gray on the other side, we just mentioned, with the potential of trading pitchers from bad rosters with Colorado. 34 and a third innings, 3.15 ERA, 1.19 whip, 30 Ks, and 3 wins on a team with only 10 wins. That's a good sign. Let's just see if Gray can keep it going. Another interesting note here on a bad team, Wilson Ramos could end up with 30 dingers. Yeah, I know. Sounds crazy. He's got 6 and 87 at bats right now. But that average that we're used to with Ramos is not going to exceed 250 this year. Shohei Ohtani is awesome. 103 at bats, 20 runs, 9 dingers, 22 RBIs, 6 stolen bases, 272 average, and a 959 OPS. Oh yeah, and he pitches Wednesday. Exciting stuff. Gentlemen, Steven Matz is a human. Can we be cool with that? Or is Jays Nation still thinking Cy Young?
That's an interesting question. And, you know, Steven Matz was the subject of a lot of conversation on some of the Blue Jays talk radio today. And one of the things that, you know, I think was brought up, and I think I kind of noticed as well, I'm not seeing the same confident pitcher on the mound. I mean, you know, early in this year, he was commanding his fastball, getting ahead of hitters, and then either putting them away with finishing pitches or continuing to make the good pitches that got him into those 1-2 and 0-2 counts and created a lot of weak contact. And what I've noticed the last couple nights, or I mean, the last couple starts, I should say, is that it seems like he's still getting ahead of hitters, but he's having a lot of trouble putting them away. And that's something that I have found a little bit concerning, but I guess correctable, because I saw a lot of 0-2s in his last start. I recall even after one of the home runs he gave up, he came out right against, I believe it was Austin Riley, got him to an 0-2, but then really struggled and I believe lost that hitter. So I'm just wondering what the both of you see, because what I see is a pitcher with similar stuff, but he seems to have lost his approach to getting hitters out.
Well, I think there's something to be said about the mental side of success too, right? I think sometimes, you go out there, you deal for a handful of games, you're like, yeah, I've got that swagger back. I think he had it. And then I think he's starting to doubt it again. And that's the job of the coach to rein him in and bring him back. So they're going to pick apart that video. They're going to do some different things. Now, Oakland has been known for many years to pick apart platoons, right? Their rosters are built to do that. And you see, like, Matt Olson wasn't in the lineup last night, right? Like, they were ready to face the lefty. They had a plan and it worked. They knew they could get some runs up against Matt's. Now, he served a meatball up to Laureano, who definitely, or Loreno, whatever pronunciation brought to you by
Laureano. Let's put them both together.
Let's call him L-Bomb. Just L-Bomb. Let's just be done with
Ramon Razor. There you go.
But the point is like, you take that away and it wasn't that bad of a start, right? And so, is it elite? No. But are we expecting elite from Mats? I'm certainly not. I think he's SP3 as a ceiling, SP2 on any given day, but SP4 probably in reality. So I think that's the way, as Jays fans, as fantasy fans or owners, we need to be looking at a Steven Matz. So I do think the value will be there. We've talked about the value that Pete Walker is a pitching coach in pretty much every forum that we all connect in. But, I think that's a great place to look.
Do you make anything of the way he came out of the game in his last start? I mean, there was a little bit of talk about, the blow up in the dugout. I guess he wanted to stay out there. If you look at the situation, the 3, 4, and 5 hitters who were due up, I think were 5 of 6 with 3 RBI against him. So I think you can defend the decision of the manager to pull him out of the ballgame at that time. But is that just a guy who wants to compete?
I mean, for me, I have more questions on a guy that's not angry than I do about a guy that's angry, right? I mean, I'm a pitcher myself, and I'm an absolute psychopath between the foul lines, right? Like, as soon as I step over that chalk line, get the hell out of my way. And then once I step away from it, once I get away from the field, it's over. It's done. But that's the mentality. Like, you got to bulldog it. You got to get out there. And I think that's part of what we're talking about with Steven Matz, is that I think maybe he's lost that a little bit, right? It's slipped. And I think he can get back there. And we saw that passive nature in New York. And I think the Jays are going to attack it because it's just not acceptable in the trajectory of this team. So, the Mets organization let many things slip under policy. I don't expect them to allow. Yeah. I don't think the Jays, with the recent alignment with that statement, are going to be pushing these pitchers to continue repeating their mistakes. So I expect a correction moving forward. Once they get home for a couple of games, I think that'll be good for Mats as well too, because they have had a split schedule so far.
And 32 innings pitched for Mats, 33 Ks, even with last night's 5-inning, 6 strikeout performance. The ERA is up now to 4.78 with the WHIP at 1.219, which is fine, and a 4-2 record. The 4 wins were out of the gate. Last 2 starts have been those 2 losses. So I think for Mats, in my opinion, if he's a top 100 pitcher at the end of the season, that would be a victory for the Jays. If his ERA is under 4.20, that would be a victory for the Jays. But that WHIP staying at 1.20 would be good. That's going to keep them in ball games. That's important. And that means he's not having a lot of issues, which Jonathan, you were alluding to, with not being able to get those outs. A lot of that is sometimes just a simple fix, not some major, overhaul that they've got to do. And I'm not sure who's been catching him the bulk of the time. I know it's probably been Jansen, and it looks like it's going to go back to that. But in the event that maybe it was Kirk, that might be an adjustment that Mats has made. Who knows? Next up, Vlad is amazing. 91 at bats, 7 home runs, 20 RBIs, 19 runs, 352 average, 1129 OPS. Oh joy, oh bliss. Jonathan, you mentioned off the top. So next guy up, Winker, Jesse Winker with the Reds. is for real. 87 at bats so far this year, 6 home runs, 16 RBIs, 20 runs, a 356 average, and a 1060 OPS. There is no outfield controversy in Cincinnati that Jesse Winker is attached to, and that is a good thing. Alex Verdugo is a top 60 player in 5x5 right now. It might be coming together for him. He had a dinger tonight. That's somebody to keep a watch for. We'll dig in a little later. Here's a little interesting one for everybody. Gleyber Torres is just home runs away from a huge ranking improvement in 5x5 format. Get him ASAP. In 97 at bats right now, he's got 8 runs, 7 RBIs, 1 stolen base, but a 292 average the last 2 weeks. But on the year, no power. Jonathan Ty, I'm interested to know, do you care? Gleyber Torres in redraft had a really high value. He's one of those like 7 or 8 supposedly elite shortstops that we had. We know Lindor's been off to a terrible start. Gleyber Torres is getting it too from Yankee fans. Would you guys consider in your leagues, ideally dynasty, but if it's redraft relatable or keeper, would you think about getting Gleyber Torres as I am?
This is an interesting question. And there are actually a couple of players who I have shares of both in redraft and dynasty, which I think throw kind of a wrench into the Gleyber Torres question. The middle infield is normally the kind of position where a guy who's going to contribute across multiple categories. I'm thinking like a Trey Turner. Those are very much at a premium. And Gleyber projects to be that sort of ball player when he's on, but we haven't seen that production, as you mentioned. And I guess the idea is that, are we trying to get on it before it comes? But right. I'm somebody who this year has gotten shares of Jazz Chisholm, who was unfortunately on the IL, and also recently Nico Horner, who's been off to a really hot start in Chicago. So that kind of throws a wrench personally into my willingness to deal for someone like Gleyber, because I think the combination of up and coming talent like that, which I've been able to secure, and some more established players put me in a good position. But I wonder, is that an irrational position to take? Should I be looking to turn one of those guys into a Gleyber?
I like what you've done. Now, Ty is a huge Dansby Swanson guy. Huge Dansby Swanson fan. So Ty, you as a huge Dansby Swanson fan, do you think maybe it's time to get off of the Swan song and start Torresing it up in your leagues?
I mean, let's be clear. Like it's Swanson TV dinners that are more the thing, but no,
he is a hungry man.
Yeah, right. The reality is I'm in on Gleyber because I me, Robbie, I love buy and low. It's one of my favorite things to do in fantasy baseball. I love to be sitting here a year from now saying, ha, and Gleyber Torres is that guy.
Sorry, what is it that you say in a year?
Ha.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's very, very technical. I like to sit here and wait for people to realize that baseball is a game of attrition, right? And so people are so reactive in fantasy baseball. It's ridiculous. The amount of rage drops and trades and silly moves. In our home league, Rob, somebody dropped David Peralta a week into the season, and then he went on an absolute tear, right? Like David Peralta has a good body of work to know the regression back to the mean was going to be there. Now, he's slightly overperformed on his regular average, but, those things happen. A guy like Jesse Winker terrifies me. He terrifies me. His lefty-righty splits still suck, right? He's hitting 429 right now against righties. That is,
and he's getting to lead off too. That's why I'm saying there isn't a controversy in my mind, that we're just good to go. Sorry, Ty, continue.
He only has 22 at-bats against lefties right now. Right? Like he's getting exited late in games or not starting against the lefties. There's still a platoon thing here. Like for me, Jesse Winker is the opposite of what we're talking about with Gleyber. Like if I had Winker and somebody wanted to do a straight up trade for Torres, that's a huge victory for me, right? Because I would put money that Torres would be ahead of Winker in almost every format by the end of this season.
Okay, well, in different positions as well, but I think like for me, it's Torres as a guy that I've been looking at. Where might I be able to pick up a real steal in my dynasty leagues that doesn't appear to be a steal now? And somebody that we're going to get to later or shortly is Austin Riley. And in points formats, Riley's line, like points per game, which we all know is a very important stat when you are talking about what a pitcher does, right? You want a pitcher that can go north of 18 points per game. You want a hitter to be somewhere north of 2.7 points per game to be useful to you, depending on your format. Now, we generally swim in the deep waters, Jonathan, of 20 plus team leagues. So we've got a lot of different players at different MLB levels. So you can dip down a little lower. You get into a smaller league, you need all of your dudes to be north of 3 points per game. And you've got a guy like Riley, who, even though he's caught fire, started so poorly that it's deceptive to see. So depending on the owner of Riley in your league, you may be able to get him, but it's going to look really obvious on the other end for anybody that can just go on the Yahoo app, which is a great app if you want to just quickly check last week, last 2 weeks, last month in the season. You can say, oh, like here are 4 different categories, and this is how this player has been doing. So if it's the last 2 weeks they've been good, great. Like maybe think about it, whether it's like deal them away or not. And David Fletcher is one of those polarizing guys to me, Ty. As soon as you said someone who's been cut in our home league, David Fletcher was cut very early in our home league. And I was like, this guy is available second, third, shortstop, outfield. Why would anybody cut him this early when he is an average monster? He does not strike out a whole lot. He walks a good rate. And the concern is, of course, power with him. But even last year in a shortened season, he was able to, put a few on the board and end up with 31 runs, and some stolen bases to boot. So I picked him up, and I'm just moving him around as I see fit where he fits into my lineup. But that's just one of those other guys that sometimes the early season rage drop is like comical for certain people in the fantasy industry. It's one of those things where it almost shows their inexperience because they're just upset. And as a result of that, or they play in really shallow leagues where you can't keep somebody who's been really poor because the way you drafted, whatever it is with your format. But anyway, that was just a quick one on Torres. We can now hit up the Tommy John train because Dustin May is on it. And it looks like Dinelson Lamet, who is starting tonight, may very soon be back on. I can't believe Dinelson Lamet is back and pitching. And to everybody who traded him before the injury, good for you. And for everybody who was like, I can't get anything for him, well, he's back. Now you can. Now please go trade Dinelson Lamet.
Yeah, make him be gone. And you really missed an opportunity to drop an NSYNC reference there.
Bye.
It's gonna be May.
Oh,
you definitely whiffed on that. After opening the show with May the 4th be with you. You just the theme. We needed to roll with
that. Was
anyway.
more of a shout out for Billy B, who posted in a couple of league chats about May the 4th be with you. So
yeah, I really think with Dustin May, like this is a time to acquire, right? Especially in your dynasty formats.
I told 3 people yesterday, go right now, go to the owner and say, look, 2023 is the next time you're going to get him back. And one of the dudes owns Danny Duffy. And I said, try it right now. Try 1 for 1. See if the guy does it. It's worth it to you in a keep forever league. Give up Danny Duffy in that beautiful looking stat line. Get you some long-term Dustin May. Do it.
Yeah.
The ginger.
I mean, I really think part of the injury is related to how tight Dustin May's pants are. Like they're unnecessarily tight.
And how loose the hair is. There's just no balance. Like, of course it mucks up your arm.
It's a lot of strain on the elbow.
100%. And like it's not up here with them. It's all with this and with the constricting.
He might have the best stuff in the game right now. Like the stuff, like he can't locate it yet, but like the stuff is dynamite. Like I don't know if you guys can name somebody off the top of your head that has better stuff aside from like blow it by you stuff. Like, yeah, it's definitely not Austin Vogt.
Brent Honeywell.
You know what? Based on my experience in MLB The Show with Brent Honeywell, it could be Brent Honeywell.
Thank you, Ty.
So
I'm glad that I was able to get Honeywell on your team too, but it's through a video game.
I'm lighting the world on fire with his production. So, that's the only time that I'm probably going to mention success for Honeywell. But like honestly, like name guys that have better stuff.
Right. And he's young. I don't know if he's eclipsed 50 career innings. So depending on your league format, he might not be able to be stashed in your minors, but at least for the rest of this year, he'll be able to go onto an injured spot. And then when you go through the offseason, you have to account for all of your players. He might have to be one of your 26 roster guys, or if you're in a 40-man roster league, one of those 40, once the season starts, he gets to go back on your IL. And ideally for him come 2023, he could be back and rolling normally, which is kind of what we are expecting from Jameson Taillon, because he was in a similar early season injury in 19 and then was off all of 20. So not to go too long on all that, because we actually have listener questions, but this was just like news and note. The final one is Mr. Tourney Boss, which we didn't mention, but you can absolutely hit us up with any questions, comments, concerns, trade things at Dingers Pod. Please tag us in questions. We are happy to do polls for you. Hit up Ty at Tourney Boss, hit myself up at Robbie Baseball 1, and even Mason here. Space for Mace.
That's right, on Twitter. And you can find me in the Clubhouse app through the club, and also at Sir John Mason on Instagram. And very soon I will find those and blend them all into one corresponding handle, I promise.
So you can do all that. And if you're interested in what's going on with Tyler O'Neill, it's now time for Ty to take a bow. Have your minute, Ty. O'Neill with a 269 average. It's rain out tonight, so this won't change before the 5th. 269 average, nice. 12 runs, 5 home runs, 11 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, and he is ranked 130th in Yahoo with only 67 at bats.
Yeah, I mean, if you were a longtime listener,
First-time caller.
You know the right response right now. It's ha, and definitely, something we've been waiting for. Regular at bats. The thing that we've been talking about for a couple years with Tyler O'Neill. He has not been given the right chance to get the at-bats he needs. I like that Jonathan beat Robbie to the reload on the beer. That's excellent.
Hey, we're talking tall boys and cans, or tall boys and glasses.
Yeah, I'm on the craft bottles, so you can take that for what it's worth.
What's the percentage you got rocking tonight?
Oh no! Well, after I learned my lesson from the last time, I'm back in the normal 5 to 6.5 range right here.
All right.
I'm onto a Kona. I'm onto a Kona Big Wave from the great island of Hawaii.
Oh, nice.
This banquet's like 1.5%. So
that's like the Michelob Ultralight, where it doesn't actually specify alcohol content.
Well,
but guys will down 20.
Well,
I have a very good buddy who used to say it's time to sober up on some Coors.
I like that guy.
I do like that.
Okay, so Tyler O'Neill, greatness.
Pick him up.
Yeah, there you go. And if anybody is interested, Harrison Bader, 2 dingers, and hit up at not Burt Reynolds, our boy Nicholas Gott, who was on the podcast in the offseason when we covered the Cardinals, and told everybody who was listening all about the Too Tight Rolling Stones shirt that he would see Harrison Bader wearing out in the club.
Dustin May Bader swap pants.
Oh, there you go.
Shirt combo.
One of them needs to wear all of it, and then the other guy can be far more comfortable, because Bader is coming off of like an injury month, right? He didn't get to start.
The problem is if May wore Bader's t-shirt, it would come up to like his rib cage.
True.
It would just be a halter, right? Like, because there's a very large body discrepancy inside.
I feel like there's the right amount of cloth for the both of them. It's just not being distributed correctly.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's good. Okay, so we actually have listener questions, and because, like I said, we originally recorded the first go with these way back on April 22nd. The names of the people who sent are long erased from this, so I apologize. But these are still relevant questions, which is why we are going to go through them tonight. So the 3 of us, have already gone through this tonight, and I kept our answers. So some of these we might be able to be quicker on, but we'll see what's up. So 12-team points keeper. At the end of the year, you get to keep 15 players. There was no specification on where they were. Do you want Spencer Torkelson or do you want Joey Gallo? Kick it to Mason first.
I actually think I may have had a different answer the last time than the one I'm going to go
You
with
are
tonight.
You are not allowed to change your answer.
I'm not allowed to change my answer. Okay, well, in that case, because
you can change.
Well, no, I'll say it this way. For me, it's a question of potential versus production, right? Joey Gallo is like an enigma this year. I have shares of Joey Gallo in redraft, and you see exit velo and walk rate, and that combination makes you think of Laddie Jr. You think of a player who's managing the strike zone, but when you look at the raw numbers, there is absolutely no power, and he is a strikeout waiting to happen. And then, Torkelson has advanced tools and has the chance to develop into something perhaps more well-rounded than Gallo. But, sticking with my original answer, I think that what Gallo has shown, if you're willing to bank on the discipline turning into production, we've already seen that's 35 to 40 home run pop. And I'm not really sure. Torkelson is still, potential for the future. So I'm going to stick with what I've got, or maybe what I'm stuck with, and that's Joey Gallo.
Well, I just
Robbie
changed
just
on the
doesn't want you
sheet.
to. Yeah, Rob just didn't want you to flip so he could take the L. That's
Right.
his big concern. Don't let him fool you. There's nothing else behind that comment.
I spent a lot of time. I spent a lot of time digging into this, and Joey Gallo is a scary ball player.
Yeah, and so things just to cover it really quick, Ty, and then I'll give it to you. We do our best not to discuss a lot of advanced stats on the podcast because I think throwing numbers at you that aren't fantasy relevant can be confusing. If you go on Twitter, you will find just like an infinite number of people who have written something, who have a website, who are tweeting 50 times a day, a whole bunch of things that don't tell you what the player is doing in fantasy. And they're fantasy people, which they're trying to help. Their mind is in the right spot. But we do that work behind the scenes. We check out, hard hit rates, what's going on, launch angle, all that stuff. And then we try to just talk within the realm of a 5x5 or an 8x8 or points, because that's what I want to know when I'm listening to a podcast that I'm listening to get better or to be better or to beat my friends or to beat a bunch of strangers and win a bunch of money, to get my family back together, whatever it is that you're doing to listen to the podcast. To watch me here.
And this is why Robbie lives the straight up OG lifestyle.
That was a beautiful. That was a beautiful, beautiful speech.
Thank you. If you're interested in boats, there will be more. Okay, there will be more. But anyway, we want to really boil her down here and just give you the straight goods and trust you trust us that we have done the work behind the scenes. So as Jonathan said, he's changed his answer because he did the deep dive and he's realized, hey, you know what? Gallo is a 3 true outcome guy to the core, and that's something that you think Torque can avoid. And I'm saying I'm good with what Gallo gives me, and rather than have Torque now in a 1-for-1 trade, I'm not going to take Gallo, because the value in fantasy, no matter your league size, is going to value Torque, who is just 1-1 in your draft, right? You can't go to anybody in any league, any league right now and say, here's Joey Gallo, give me your first round pick. No one's going to do that today. So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about if I was to keep one of these two dudes, I would want to keep Gallo, but I would be trading Torkelson away. And that was something we discussed before too. These aren't like your last guy to keep. These are core parts of your 15 dudes.
Yeah, no, and I think on the other side of it, Torque, obviously the 1-1, lots of pathway for him in Detroit. Like we might see him next season. I think anyone that believes we're going to see him this year, I will point you at Andrew Vaughn to see to show you what that looks like when you rush a guy to the pros, right? Like Andrew Vaughn. I saw a funny thing on Twitter last night. It's like, is Andrew Vaughn going to start in center field now? Right. And so that in itself is funny. But,
it's going to be Yoquili Cespedes. That's who it's going to be. They're going to be everybody that they brought up and signed.
It's Billy Hamilton, right?
Yeah,
scary. It's scary. Like, and that's the thing that you have to look at. And what we talked about previously is like, this decision probably is based on where you're at. Right? Are you trying to win right now? Torque's not going to help you do that, right? Are you going to make the 1-for-1 trade? No. But if you have Torque, you're trying to win now, you probably should make that acquisition using Torque to fill out the rest of your roster, especially this year. Like, look at the injuries. Like, they're everywhere. Yeah. And they're going to continue to be everywhere for at least the next couple of months. So, we need to be cognizant of depth in formats. And I think a lot of people, especially in redraft, are guilty of grabbing the best player in the trade and thinking it's a win, right? That's not necessarily how you win championships. It's the way to think you're going to win and then to lose because you didn't have the depth. So Torque for me, I think has the higher upside. Gallo might hit more home runs, but I will always take the balanced player, the high floor, as I like to talk about all the time. And that's Torque for me.
Okay. So 12 team head to head. I'm falling behind in runs and RBIs. Who's on the wire? Now, when we did this the first time, it was a different group of guys. When we did this the second time, it was a different group of guys. And this time, I'm just going to say it's really, really hard to figure out who would be your ideal candidates for runs and RBIs. Right now, I would be looking at anybody who's batting in the Oakland A's, not named Jed Lowry, just because he would have been one of those hot waiver guys last month. But do yourself a favor, depending on your league format, and just go to the search and position all batters. Like last 7 days, let's just see who's been hot and hit up runs. So, I'm in a league right now where Brandon Belt's on the wire. It's crazy, but it's true. Austin Hayes is another guy. And this is Brandon Belt before the 7 RBIs tonight also, I believe, within the last 7 days. So, Amid Rosario, whose line has not solidified. His line has looked a lot better the last week. He's another guy. Matt Duffy. But these are all guys with individual games that have boosted them up there. Just do that. Go get yourself a streamer. We talked about Matt Beattie on Sunday, and what did Matt Beattie go do? Have his career best game. I think it was 3 or 4 hits and 7 RBIs. So just check on the wire, and depending on when this airs, I mean, you've already probably filled it in with a few guys. That's the easiest way to go through this. To a more interesting, complex question here, guys. Riley or Jamar Candelario rest of season? Jonathan, who's your boy?
It's Riley for me. Not just because we got to watch a little bit of him firsthand during the series against the Jays, but I think a lot of people might not realize Riley is the hottest bat on the Braves, even hotter than probably the front runner for MVP right now, Acuna. And he is just absolutely performing. The OPS, over 1,300 in the last 2 weeks. He's probably the only person reaching base more often than Vladdy Jr. lately. And I think the thing that makes it really exciting is the fact that he's still batting down that order. He's batting, not in a premium spot. He's following guys, so he's going to be seeing pitches, and he just looks really confident. And it doesn't look like what we're seeing. Obviously, the production won't stay the same, but I don't think that what we're seeing is outside of the talent of the ball player. And again, avoiding going towards too many, advanced statistics. I think specifically walk rate is something that's really interesting, even within a fantasy context, because when you're not getting true outcomes, I think walk rate for me is a way I always try and judge how a hitter's controlling the zone. And his is way down year over year. And he's now combining that with some real power. So I love Riley rest of season. And that's not taking anything away from Candyman. This is a pro Riley stance for me.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, like I've been in on Candy early. Like he was a guy that everyone was out on. And it was, again, an opportunity to say ha. And so, that's one that I was happy to be ahead of the curve on. I'm going to say Candy's my guy. But we did talk about this in the postseason last year and into the offseason. Riley was turning that corner.
He was a buy. He was a hard buy for you, Ty.
Correct. And we saw hard contact all over the place, right at people, a couple that left the field of play in the playoffs. There was progression. It was obvious. It was coming. We're seeing the production this year as a result of that. And we're going to continue to see it. Like, I don't believe we fully tapped into the power here for Riley. So
you're right.
I'm going to stick with Candy because he's a traditional slow starter. And I think if you're to go back in the last question, if you're looking for a guy that runs an RBIs, Candy's a great acquisition target right now with the slow start. Rob, you and I have talked about this over the years. Like I made a career out of acquiring slow starters. I'd let other people draft them, and then I would go pick them up in a cheap trade later. And Machado was one of those guys for years that people didn't realize was a slow starter. There's other guys out there on the market.
Well, for a couple of Jays, Edwin, if you want to go even further back, Vernon Wells was a slow starter. And then
Vernon Wells was just a slow starter because he needed the Jays to be up by 7 before he produced. Right? Like, talk about he's the Aaron Rodgers.
Some people like to get slapped in the face. Others, choked. Different people get hyped for different things. So
I genuinely liked Vernon Wells. I just hated the fact that all of his big hits came when the games were over.
But it was right. Okay,
I
so
think the saddest part about Vernon Wells is that my favorite thing to watch him do was corral a lazy fly ball. That man could really catch. That man could really catch a fly ball.
Gold Glove center fielder, him
He
and Adam
certainly
Jones.
could.
You know what? In the Statcast era, he would have been moved out of center field so fast. Like
He would have been too big to even let him get a shot as a pro, right?
He was a terrible center fielder. Like how he won a Gold Glove, I don't know. Like statistically, the guy was terrible out there.
Well, speaking of statistics that matter, Austin Riley the last 2 weeks has had 41 at bats, and in those 41 at bats, he has been oobs productive, as the kids say. I think 10 runs, 3 dingers, and that's all the dingers on the year. 6 RBIs and a 439 average. So that's your 5x5, no stolen bases. But in the 41 other bats that started his season, only 6 runs, no home runs, 1 RBI, and a very dismal average that I think was under 180 something, if my mathematics are correct, and they generally aren't. So that's what we're dealing with now. Is Riley had a week out the gate and is then really boosted himself up. 66% owned right now in Yahoo. And did you guys know this? Hitter Shohei Ohtani on Yahoo is 91% owned. How on earth is it that 9% of Yahoo leagues do not have someone in that league active that would have Ohtani? Like it makes no sense. It totally discredits Yahoo as a resource for percentage rostered in my mind, when a guy who is just like taking the game by storm can't be 100% owned. If it was 99, I'd get it, right? Like, you just don't want to say 100, but how can it be 91? It makes no sense to me.
It boggles the mind.
Stupid people. All right, on to the next one. Can you compete in Dynasty head-to-head without top dog starting pitcher? So I'm going to say, Ty, because I think we talked about this before, from DeGrom, wherever he is in your ranking, which would be, 1 to 3, I guess, if you want to be weird, to Kershaw, Barrios, top 20 kind of guys. So you don't have any of those top 20s. Can you compete?
I mean, the answer is yes. You obviously can, right? Is it going to be easy? Absolutely not. I mean, you can piece it together. You can stream. You can pull out things, like you can build a reliever heavy team. Like it's dependent on your format in a lot of ways, but also, it depends on your ability to predict the future. And, you can get in there on the waiver wire and grab some guys that are going to have 2-start weeks almost every single week, right? Like there's very seldom a week where there's not a 2-start guy on the wire, right? So, the reality is that's a pathway to do that. The second part is you can
join us on Sundays when we do the live stream, because we discuss some of those dudes. So, yeah.
We got this. No. We'll cue it in.
Let's get fabulous, it says.
Yeah, and that's the Sunday show where we're going to cover all of the waiver pickups that you should be focused on each and every week. Brought to you by us, because
and not Waterloo Brewing Company, because they don't get back to me.
The ball. You have missed your opportunity. So I mean, the answer is you can find guys, and a guy like Marcus Stroman might not be considered in that top tier, but has produced so far, right? Like you can grab 4 and 5 of those guys, assuming, Jesus Luzardo is not going to break his hand, right? Like, there's a lot of
gamers got a game, Ty. Gamers got a game.
You got tired of going up against Brett Honeywell and MLB The Show.
That's right.
That's what got him.
Well, it's funny because I'd been trying to acquire Luzardo in our home league, and the guy was like, you know what, that was a pretty good offer, but I'm going to stick with him. And then like right after the injury was announced, I'm like, are you ready to deal him? He's like, sure. I'm like, oh, sorry, trade's off the table. And this is like a buddy, right? So I just like to bust his balls on it, but it was pretty funny.
You got greedy.
Yeah. So it was good fun. But I mean, you can do it. There's ways to do it. It's not that hard, but you have to have a very specific strategy to pull it off.
Yeah. I mean, Jonathan, do you have any experience in trying to either deal with a season where you don't have the best pitchers, or a scenario where you have made a logical, or at least at the time, it seemed logical decision to go for hitters and to figure out your pitching later?
Yeah, I have. And I think it's really what Ty has said. It comes down to a combination of things. It's streaming, but it's also in that early portion of the season, finding those guys who, they start off as streamers, but they stick. Like, one person who's really come through for me in some recent years like that is a guy like Sean Manaya. That's a guy who always seems to be out and available in both my dynasty and my redraft leagues. And, he performs well often, for periods at a time. So I think it takes a great deal of skill, but assuming that your weakness in the pitching means there's a strength in another area, I think you can make up the difference.
Yeah, and I think it goes to go ahead, Robbie.
I was going to say, and I will go because we've done this already a few times. I don't want to skip it, but it sounds like I'm repeating myself, but no one else has heard this yet. You need to have the next guys coming up if it's dynasty. So you are okay to not have Bieber, Cole, DeGrom, Kershaw, blah, 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 all those guys. That's okay. But as Ty had said, and Jonathan talked about, you need to be getting those wily vets that can just kick it around. Baumgartner would be an excellent example this year of a guy nobody likes who's getting it done. Danny Duffy is another guy. Those are the guys you need to own in that scenario. Wily veterans. There's two reasons why. One, they start every fifth day. And two, they don't have a lot of value, so you can get them. Now, when they start to hit and you're in season, that's when the story changes. But that's also how you compete, is that you get those guys that nobody else cares about, but they're going to start every fifth day, right? They're not in line to lose their job. And in the meantime, you need to be using your minor league system, no matter how big or small it is, to devote to pitching. That's the opposite of what everyone in the fantasy industry is telling you to do right now. And that's why you do it. Because you can't just run the same direction as everybody and expect to beat them. If they're all going nuts for all the J2 guys, if they're all going nuts for these high school Zach Veens, Robert Hassel IIIs, let them. Go and get yourself some college pitching. Go and get yourself guys who will start within 2-3 years of their draft date, and then you can build up. You also acquire the Mick Abels as they are available to you. You have to be ready for guys like Eli Morgan, who pop up out of nowhere, Trevor Rogers, who we talked about a little bit in the offseason. You need to be ahead of your friends, your competition, whoever it is you're playing against. And that will allow you to currently go without, and then in the future be laughing in their faces when you've got it all.
Well, and the other part of it comes down to your draft strategy, Robbie, right? Like that conversation is perfect for the way I draft. I'm notorious for under preparing for drafts because I let what happens in that draft dictate it. And so sometimes I've ended up with no front end pitching, right? I've been there because there was a run ridiculously early, and here I am sitting with 3 high end hitters that separate me from the pack right off the hop on the offensive side. So just play by ear, understand what's around you and adjust accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, even in my TGFBI league, which, that's the one with all the fantasy guys, there's over 400 of us industry folk, using some hand quotes because it's a real mixed bag. Everybody was going nuts for pitching. So I just said, well, you know what? I'm going to figure it out in season with my pitching. And the problem that I've run into now is, and this happens to everybody, so it's not like I'm some special case. I've had some of my best hitters miss significant time. Well, when you're already planning to slowly improve your pitching as the year goes on and use part of your or most of your $1,000 in your fab for that purpose, and then you have to go and spend some of it replacing injuries, well, that starts to get in your way. But I've waited my time. We've got to the 100 at bat plateau for several guys now, and I'm starting to make moves. And in several of my leagues, especially the keeper leagues, I'm moving outfielders out. Aaron Hicks is getting dropped everywhere. Frazier's getting dropped everywhere. And I'm taking guys with categories that are getting me there. But at the same time, if you try to do that, just hitters, and figure out the pitching later, you could be in the same boat I am in some of those leagues. So you got to be careful with it. It is a strategy for sure. Okay, what's a reasonable return for Charlie Morton in a dynasty league? The info that we're missing is the size of the league. But what we can tell you is what Charlie Morton is, and that's a 37-year-old with 28 in the third innings, 33 Ks this year, 4.76 ERA, and a 1.2 WHIP on a destined to win 90 games Atlanta team, whatever we want to call them. What do you think might be reasonable, Ty, if you were to acquire? And maybe, Jonathan, if you want to talk about what it would take for you to deal him, that'd be fun. One guy does one.
Ty, I'll let you go first on that one.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm not trading Charlie Morton right now, and that's because I'm selling too low. And at worst case, I'll wait this one out, knowing that I can sell him for a little bit less than what I could now. Like that's the worst case for Charlie Morton. The risk is injury. The risk is career ender potentially for a guy like Charlie Morton. But I would take that risk knowing the likelihood of him regressing to the mean is better than the likelihood of him being injured. He's got a good history of staying healthy. So I would push to the side of wait and then trade. And at that point, like, maybe a Glaber Torres, right? You could look at a guy like that right
Whoa,
now.
really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh
Yeah,
my
I mean,
lord!
I think the where Glaber's at, like I think
I
you could
wish I
target
owned him in a league with you.
I wouldn't trade you, Glaber.
Well, so let's pretend you are the guy who needs Charlie Morton. Say you drafted like I did, and you're like, my gosh, my pitching is so smelly that Charlie Morton would be my SP2. What would you be willing to give away? And you don't have to say like a specific player, but like a type of player. Would you be trading Austin Riley?
No, I would have a skateboard with a garbage on it. I would put some stuff in it, light on fire, and push it over to you, and then expect you to send me Charlie Morton back. Like,
all right, I mean, Jonathan, what about you? Do you have something
this is
else?
hard for me, and this is hard for me because I feel sort of the same way Ty does. It's difficult to price Charlie Morton, but putting myself in the seat of what I would be willing to get to deal him, I think for me, it would have to be somebody who's willing to give me a bat, because I think the pitcher to pitcher value, it's probably going to be very tough to bring back a quality arm for Charlie Morton. And, when I think about that, you think about maybe somebody who has a veteran that's kind of burning a hole on their roster, like somebody who really has, I think annoyed a lot of people is like a Max Muncy, right? And you would never get that 1-for-1, but I would really try to do a package with Charlie Morton that can get me an underperforming big league roster spot, somebody that I can put into my lineup every day. And I think that's about what it would take for me to deal him at this moment in time.
Yeah, I think you could target though, like a winning team that's looking to solidify some depth. You could go after a guy like Casey Mize on a winning team. A guy like Tariq Skubal is a guy that could also fit that category. I mean, if you want a riskier option, Tristan McKenzie could be that guy. I'm not a McKenzie guy. I would stay away from that trade, but other people seem to think there's some upside. Like that's the kind of guys you could theoretically target on the pitching side. But I'm with you. Like if you're trading Charlie Morton, odds are you're either going prospect hunting, lottery ticket hunting, or you're looking to switch for a bat.
Right.
I definitely like the idea, as Ty had said, about maybe looking for one of those former top prospect starting pitchers who's now in the grind, because you're giving up a guy at the end of the career that you can now pick up to get the rest of the career. And again, it has to be, like you said, you have to be dealing him to a team that thinks this is the guy that gets me where I need to be, not, lotto ticket, because then he's not going to pay the price. At what point, if you have one, do you trade or cut a player that you thought would succeed if they are given opportunity and they aren't? So we are now starting week 5, or we are in week 5 of the fantasy season. Players are starting to get close to, by the end of this week, we'll have some pitchers around 40 innings. 100 at bats plus is going to be common by the end of the week for hitters. What would you be doing? Would you be looking to cut guys now? Are you, in dynasty mode, would you be wanting to wait a full season as a professional? Where do either of you guys maybe have ideas of, and cut trade? So it's not just cut and they're gone off your roster. At what point do you decide you're no longer interested? Jonathan?
Yeah, I think for me, this question is an interesting one, and I split it between sort of the hitters and the pitchers. Hitters, I think, you have to sort of look at circumstance. A lot of times, especially if you're in a 5-category league, your RBI categories, your unscored categories, those are based on circumstance. And you may even look at a player with talent, and regardless of their performance, also combine that with the fact that the lineup won't be great. Maybe the ballpark doesn't agree with them. And I could see myself, and I have moved off of hitters, probably right around that 100 at bats, or even earlier in some cases, if I really feel I have a hunch and I want to get ahead of that value going down. But for me, the pitchers are completely different. And the pitchers, it's based on the stuff. And, pitchers, I think, as Blue Jays fans, we saw Roy Halladay, turn us into the best team in the league once every 5 days, for many years. And as a pitcher gets started, I like to look at how the hitters respond to the stuff. So if I see a pitcher with good stuff, early, you often see command issues. Sometimes you see a little bit of bad luck. So I think as far as pitchers are concerned, you have to go with the eye test. And I'm willing to wait a lot longer if I think a pitcher has the stuff to be successful.
Like a Kyle Drabeck.
Egg.
Oh, snap. Yeah. That was a great hook.
I'm going to be quiet now.
Hey, so Jonathan left. Where'd he go?
So I'm very close to the way Jonathan kind of alluded to it. Now, I will say this. Robbie's the master of opportunity prediction, right? There's very few people that I've played fantasy baseball with that get ahead of opportunity better than Robbie does. That said, I usually take the approach that Jonathan does to help predict opportunity, and that's I do a lot more eye test, video test. I scout my guys a little bit differently, and I'm doing that in advance, especially in the deeper formats. Like, there's guys that were willing to give Tyler O'Neill to me for nothing. Right. Ronnie Roto, where you at, buddy? Hello. So, that's definitely some of those things that, I like to take advantage of. So I don't find myself in the scenario a lot where the opportunity doesn't come about because either I've scouted them properly or I've scouted them incorrectly. And so this patience for opportunity doesn't generally happen in the way that I build my teams. And so it's just a gray spot for me. So I don't have a great generic answer, but I usually, if I do find myself in that scenario and there's not playing time and it doesn't look like playing time is going to happen, I'm pretty quick to cut bait regardless of at bats.
Okay. And then for myself here, one of the things that I absolutely look for is the team's 40-man roster. So if a guy has been put on the team's 40-man roster, and we talk about this every offseason, so this isn't late breaking news for anybody. If you've been listening for a while, you have heard this. It just may not have stuck, but now is just the refresher course here. Look to see who teams keep and protect from the Rule 5 draft. Look to see who players get in the Rule 5 draft. Akil Baddoo is a prime example this year of a guy who was picked up in the Rule 5 draft, started hot. Everybody got real excited. Something that we had talked about before with Baddoo was strikeout concern. Well, what has happened, from spring training, which is him taking walks, to Major League Baseball, is him no longer taking walks and just swinging away, and having some good individual games with limited at bats as well, has built this up as like, oh, Akil Baddoo is really good. I'm not cutting Akil Baddoo, right? Because there's no way that I own him anywhere, and he cost me a lot. If anything, I've been stuck with Akil Baddoo as his stock has dropped. So I'm not going to get rid of somebody who's on my roster like that, who has finally got into Major League Baseball. Now, if it's through the Rule 5, it's different because they have essentially failed the organization they were drafted with, or, most recently traded to, and then been exposed to the Rule 5 draft. Those are guys that I look to acquire where other teams are still interested. Kai Tom was somebody we were kind of interested to see how he would go, but he was dropped by Oakland and then picked up by the Pirates, and the average is like below 100. But the point is that if I'm looking at one of those Rule 5 guys, I'm giving them more leash than I will Edwin Rios with the Dodgers, who I just don't think there's a long-term play for him there. Matt Beattie is a similar guy. He's a streamer. You love him to do well, but you don't think, oh, he is their future this, because he's not with the Dodgers. The Dodgers have legitimate ball players basically in positions today with long-term contracts or on the cusp of the minors that look like they can go up. Like Kyber Ruiz hit a home run the other day, played for the day for the doubleheader, and then get sent back down. I think he's going to get sent back down. I shouldn't say for sure he is, but that's like the kind of depth the Dodgers have. So I'm not going to go and get some like streamer catcher that comes up for the Dodgers randomly. That guy's got nowhere to go. So I look for those things. And then as to Jonathan's point about looking at stuff, it's important to know who's beating the odds and who's behind. So if someone's beating the odds and coming up like Steven Matz, getting the wins, and you don't necessarily believe in them, well, once they turn into that pumpkin, or once they start to suck or whatever, you need to know that should have been coming in the first place. But I wouldn't cut bait if they've got off to that hot start. I would just like let it roll. But if it's on the other end and they suck and they should be better, Robbie Ray's line is, just to pick another Blue Jay. He's somebody who I think could, by the end of the season, be a top 100 pitcher, but do it in somewhat of a disappointing fashion where he's got some great outings and he's got some real stankers. So let's go to a quick one here, gentlemen. Soto or Vlad, who you got?
Vladdy Jr. I have been very, very pleased with what we've seen from Vladdy. The tools are elite, and what we've seen this year is approach to really unleash, I think, what everybody has thought is in there. The stat line speaks for itself, but what I see is a fit and confident ball player. And Juan Soto is a fantastic ball player. And, in the interest of, full disclosure, if I'm a manager picking a ball club, I perhaps take Soto because of the athleticism on defense. But this is fantasy baseball we're talking about. And Vladdy Jr. to me is on a track to be a Miggy Cabrera type with, triple crown potential. So I'm feeling very happy as a Blue Jays fan, and it's Vladdy Jr. all day for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to second the Vladdy one, and it's very simple for me. It comes down to the power differentiation. Like I tend to agree. Soto might end up being the better ball player at the end of the day. But in terms of fantasy ownership, gotta love, Vladdy's upside. Gotta love the power. Gotta like what he can do from there.
All right. Well, gentlemen, you're both wrong. It's Soto. Ty, this one's for you. Kluber always starts slow, and he's on my waiver wire. Do I pick him up?
I mean, the answer is yes. Do we not see what he did this week?
Yep. He is pitching good. Yeah. So pick him up.
Kluber's got stuff. I mean, stuff was never Kluber's problem, right? It's just whether he can stay healthy or not. That's the risk that you're going to take with a guy like Kluber, and I think he'll reward you.
And the ballpark doesn't necessarily favor him, but we're also getting a lot of cold conditions, cold starts right now. So let's just take advantage of it. And again, if he's on your wire, it's not like you've invested anything into him other than whomever you dropped, and maybe you only have X number of pickups a week. Hoffman will have a 2-start week next week. Now we get to update some of these things, which is fun, which has been confirmed. His stat line prior to tonight's start was 2-2 with a 3.33 ERA. He had a bit of a rough one up against the White Sox, who I thought would have been crying in their own tears over the loss of Luis Robert to go along with, Eloy Jimenez and all these other things. But they appeared to be capable of lighting him up. So what are we thinking on Hoffman now? Because we've been discussing it regularly. Do we recommend buying him?
Yeah. Go ahead, Jonathan.
No, I mean, for me, and you'll probably have a deeper dive on the actual, performance of Hoffman. But one of the things that also makes me uncomfortable is how Cincinnati has played their ball games. I mean, even the starting pitchers that have performed well have also been, sometimes undermined by the performance of the bullpen, which has great arms, but hasn't always delivered the wins. So I think when you combine the topsy-turvy line now of Hoffman with the fact that Cincinnati's struggling to get the wins across the finish line, there may be other places you're looking to go.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I expect to see the regression here, and I think that's the time to buy. I've dropped him where I own him, but I expect to
or traded him to me,
Exactly. And so I'm happy with the trade that we made. You get what you need. I got what I needed. And that's a good trade. So, at the end of the day, Hoffman will bounce back. Whether Cincinnati has the patience to wait for him, that's the variable in my mind. But like I said, in the offseason, I don't think you make the trade for Tyler Stevenson, a guy that was producing out of your bullpen, to get a guy that you're eventually going to slide into your bullpen. So I really think, for multiple reasons, they have zero depth in Cincinnati at the starting pitching position. I think they're going to run him out there regularly as long as he doesn't leave the game like he did tonight on a consistent basis. So I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they're making changes, and I think you'll see the production come around. But if we get to June, July, and we don't see the changes, I would be very concerned. But I've said before that I think June 1 is the kind of timeline I'm looking at.
Yeah, so tonight it was 2 1/3 tie, 4 earned runs, 1 walk, which was a switch up from the previous performance against the Dodgers, where we had discussed the fact that he was going to nibble his way around the lineup, and then he did. Tonight in the 2 1/3, he had 4 strikeouts, but he did give up a dinger. I don't remember if it was a 3-run shot or not. And then Jose De Leon, who was the other high K guy, who was possibly competing for that 5th spot, but has since lost out. He came in after for 1 2/3 innings, but gave up 3 runs himself. So I feel like Hoffman's safe in that role. And we had talked about, I mean, we've said it so many times already. If in a perfect year, Hoffman would have 30 starts, I feel like you could go into 2022 and say, Hoffman is someone I would roster because in a daily lineup league, I would probably start him 20 of the 30 times he's going to start. And that's a top 100 pitcher to me. And we're letting him hang out with the Cincinnati coaches and see the goodness that can come from that this year. And as Ty, you had talked about before, whether it was recorded or kept or whatever, they were able to help out Bauer. They were able to help out Sonny Gray. Now it looks like they need to help out Hoffman and Castillo. They got to get those boys back on the right track. Let's dive in.
Castillo, they need less spin. Just saying.
Maybe. Let's get into a little prospect chatter here. Arizona prospect Corbin Carroll, outfielder. Is he going to be a complete player or more likely a defensive replacement? I'm pursuing him in a trade.
I mean, I'm out on Corbin Carroll. Like, it's just not a guy I target. I think, the prospect capital he carries right now is far too high to chase him for the production, right? Like, I mean, I think, Rob, you've talked about it in the past, Madrigal as a comparable kind of upside, right? I think it's
high
not
average,
foregone
low power.
But we haven't seen the upper minors production yet. So until we see that, like, it's very hard to say that this contact tool, like if you look at the scouting grade for the hit tool, it's 35 out of 70, right? I mean, that's a long way to go to become Madrigal. And that's at the lower minors. Like, I would like to see some confidence in the contact at that point. Still young, high school hitter, right? And we've talked about it in the past, the failure rate of high school hitters. So, I'm just there's too many red flags here. If I own him, I'm selling him. And so if you're pursuing him in a trade, you should wonder why that this guy's available if he's such a highly regarded prospect.
I agree with that also. The only thing I think is maybe an additional question to ponder. Carroll does have plus speed. And especially in 5 category formats and even in points formats, the ability to put up something in that steals category, as he's shown he'll probably do, is something that's highly desirable. But I also am skeptical of the hit tool. There's a lot being said about the idea that he's adding power, but I think he's always more of a contact hitter. And of course, you can't steal first base. So like you, I think, the prospect rating way outweighs the actual arc of his potential right now.
I concur. Yeah, it seems to me that everyone's forgotten that Nick Madrigal was drafted high, highly touted, came up, and now he's kind of this average only box he's been put into in fantasy. And I had thought before the season that La Russa was going to, the old school part of La Russa's game was going to really help out. And he was going to say, look, Nick, you got to turn that lineup over and you need to get on second. So if you're going to hit your single, that's fine, but you need to steal the base. And if there's 2 out, I want you stealing because you're the 9th hitter. So when, Anderson's coming up, I would rather Anderson come up with you not on base in a new inning or on second if there's 2 out. So get yourself to second, but that just hasn't happened. But with Corbin Carroll, I'm thinking, well, an outfielder without power needs to hit well, needs to move himself around the diamond, which, to your point, Jonathan, he's going to have to with that speed. If not, he's going to find himself as a defensive replacement. What was it? Dwayne Wise? Was that that's the guy I'm thinking of? Rajai Davis. Right. They all end up in Toronto for a brief period of time. That's what Corbin Carroll could become, is one of those guys who Brett Phillips might be another one of those dudes who just has bits and bobs of success, but not a proper starting job with, 550 at bats for 3 straight years. That's the concern with Carroll for me because of the potential lack of power. This was a new one that, we've recorded many times, as we've said. This is a new one that somebody had said in a fantasy baseball universe thing on Facebook that I found fascinating. They said average is a terrible stat to have in 5x5. And so my question is, is average a bad stat for fantasy? We hear about people switching their leagues to OBP and using OPS. So if you're in a larger format, it might be 8x8 or 6x6, and you use OPS. What do you guys feel about average as far as fantasy? Is it a good indicator of a player's ability? Is OBP or OPS better? Thoughts, Jonathan, to you?
I mean, I think this question can be answered, one of two ways. I mean, whether or not it's the best indicator of a player's skill, I mean, I'll leave to maybe more, mathematically minded people. But I think we're talking about baseball here. And, baseball and batting average, I think I at least recognize batting average as a traditional and legitimate measure of a player's success. So I really enjoy leagues that expand the categories. I know I've spoken to the two of you. I think you're in an 8x8 league, which sounds like it's really fantastic for a number of reasons. But I don't know that you need to like throw out the baby with the bathwater and get rid of the traditional batting average altogether.
Yeah, that line of throwing out the baby with the bathwater, that's terrible. that poor child. So Ty, what are your thoughts on
I have no
average?
children, if you can't tell.
I hope it's not because you did that.
I've always had no children.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't look at batting average specifically. I'm looking at contact, right? I think that's a more interesting underlying stat for me. Like,
but is it a bad stat for fantasy? Like, would you prefer it be launch angle? You know what I mean? Like,
no. Like, I mean, for me, like batting average is an indicator of their ability to produce, right? I mean, if you don't have a batting average, you can't create runs, you can't create RBIs. Yes, there are some guys with insane slugging percentages that, the Joey Gallo we talked about earlier is a guy that fits into that category, but the success rate in a category format that, the 8x8 is an exposure. It's part of what I like about the 8x8 is it exposes those tools that are just power only, because you lose in the Ks. Odds are most of them don't have a great eye at the plate because they're swinging hard, swinging miss rates up, average hurts, and OPS is good but not great. So neutralizes it. So for me, the hit tool sets the tone for everything else, and it's one of my favorite underlying pieces of the puzzle that predicts success that I like to focus on.
Okay, yeah, and I think like if we're going to talk about something that needs to be changed in 5x5, so if we're counting the 10 categories, average is not in that conversation. For me, it would be wins, pitcher wins. That's the one, and that's a different conversation that we can get into because there are a lot of variables within that. But people that are complaining about average, I think are people that believe they are better than the leagues that they're playing in. And for those guys, I say, join us, go into the big formats. Get into the 20 team, get into the 24, step into a 30 team league and see how you do with 5x5 categories or 6 or 8. See how that works out for you, because you need to know what works and what doesn't work. And if you're saying something as simplistic as the average, so the successful at bat is not relevant, then I think OBP isn't the answer. I think you need to go to the OPS with average, as Ty has done in our home league. And I just love that because that allows more complete hitters to succeed. So you're rewarding a guy to take a walk. You're also rewarding a guy who smashes the ball really hard. So a quick one here. Altuve or Julio Urias in a 14-team, 6-player keeper. Ty, who would you take in that?
I'm going to go with Altuve because that's the guy I got in this trade.
Okay.
And I'm sticking by it, even though, the early returns are in the week
not working.
Yeah, Altuve has 1 hit and Urias had a good outing, but he pitched against Milwaukee. So pretty much everybody except for the Dodgers has gotten wrecked by Milwaukee. But I think by the end of the season, you will see some of the flaws in Urias. I took the trade because it gave me flexibility with my position guys. I like what it does in the league. And Urias just scares me at this point. Like, there's just too much soft contact happening with him that I'm very concerned it's going to turn into hard contact as the scouting gets around on him.
on a previous recording that did not get to air, I swear after this episode, we won't be talking about that fact again. You were discussing, Ty, a strategy in that league, which was collecting all of the second base eligible players.
I have 4 second basemen.
There you go.
Like I have Altuve, Biggio, Hap, and Brandon Lau. And so the latter of those 3 all play at least 3 positions. So the flexibility that I have in that roster, the flexibility other teams will require later in the season as the injuries start to pile up. I am sitting on house money, and I'm looking forward to acquiring good players later. Once people realize that they should have accepted the buy early options on these guys, because they almost that entire group has struggled to start the season.
Absolutely, they've struggled.
Again, we've talked about it multiple times in this show. Regression to the mean is coming. Those guys will all be fine. They're all very good baseball players. And you throw Ryan Mountcastle, who's also on that roster with multiple positions into there. There's lots of depth that I have flexibility on that I'm super excited about.
If you don't mind, what is your record in the home league right now after 4 weeks?
I'm 2-2.
2-2.
But
okay. I couldn't remember.
But both weeks that I lost were by fractions. And really, like, considering I've been hurt, I've been slow starts, I'm pretty happy being 2-2 because it could have been a lot worse.
Okay. So Jonathan, who do you want if you're not Ty, if you're not trying to collect all the second base eligible players? Do you want Altuve, who is 30, right, Ty? Is that right? 30, 31?
I mean, he's half of a 30-year-old, basically.
Right, yeah, physically. And then you got the one-eyed wonder in Julio, who's 23-ish.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head right there by alluding to the age. I mean, when I see Urias, I see a 24-year-old pitcher who's now approaching 300 innings and is pitching to a 3.16 ERA. And, he's somebody who, at 24 has pitched over parts of 6 seasons. So, 276 innings is, maybe a season and a half, or 3 seasons in the modern day. But it's over a long it's over a long enough time, and including playoff results, that I think we've kind of seen what we could expect to get from Urias, if you ask me. And I like the longer term value, obviously, of the profile of him as a pitcher at that age and with a ball club that stands to win 90 plus games for the foreseeable future. So I think it's Urias for me.
I will say this. He has a career high 8.2 barrel rate, 8.2%. Like that's the piece that concerns me. Like, it's substantially higher than his career average. The wipeout just isn't where I'd like it to be. The walk rate is down. There's things to like. The hard hit rate is what scares me. It's creeping up to league average, and I think I got above league average return in that trade. So, like, that's the way I'm looking at it. Is there's just some underlying question marks. Like, I would love to be wrong because I love Julio Urias. Like, I do. He's one of my core guys. But this is just me hedging my bet because I own him in several places.
Okay. I'd love you to be wrong too, because I like Urias, and I own him in leagues as well. So I prefer him to Altuve, and I've never owned Altuve in Dynasty. I don't even know if I have
the trade as well. I wanted to own him once.
Yeah. Like I feel like for him, it's always been because he's been so valuable. And as we talked about in the offseason, people have just forgotten that. And if anybody watched in New York tonight, boy, did he get a round of applause.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I will be happy to be sitting there waiting with a ha.
Okay, oh my goodness, final question. This episode's going to hit somewhere around 90 minutes, so interesting. Who could be the Blue Jays utility guy? So, Jonathan, you are joining us again from your Clubhouse fame with the Toronto Blue Jays.
That is right.
It fan club? Is that what it's called?
I believe it's the fan club, but with the kind of predictions we're putting out, we might not have to find a more sophisticated name for what we are.
I think every time you ask
quite well lately.
Well, every time you ask before a game what the prediction is that I've been part of, I'm like, well, the Jays lose. And it's not that I want the Jays to lose, but it's like, well, I don't like this matchup. I don't like something about it, and I'm fearful. But who could be the Jays, the legitimate utility guy? If they're going to pick a dude, is it Santiago Espinal? Is it Lourdes Gurriel Jr.? Is it Kevin Biggio? Who do you think? Now, we've seen Biggio up and down that lineup. He's everywhere. Espinal just keeps getting stuck in the back third of that lineup, and he's hitting. He's not getting power, but he's hitting. And then Lourdes, good Lourdes, who has formerly, once upon a time, been a major league shortstop.
Yeah, and it's an interesting question because I think with what's been going on with the ball club the last few weeks, and specifically the way we've seen Kevin Biggio used in the outfield and all over the infield, your mind kind of goes to that place. But it's actually been in conversations with the two of you where that option of Lourdes Gurriel really starts to look like an attractive one. And I think when you talk utility, we think about the glove, a guy like Johnny McDonald comes to mind. But a utility ball player can also be somebody with a plus bat. And Gurriel will give that to you at pretty much any of the positions on this ball club that he's likely to be used in. So, partially thanks to the both of you, and I know you for sure, Robbie, Gurriel definitely seems like a good option to me, but I wonder whether or not Biggio is the more likely option.
Yeah, I've been really consistent on this one all offseason. I think Lourdes is the obvious trade guy in this lineup. He's too streaky. He doesn't provide the valuable defense that Ramo Grichuk does. He doesn't provide the pop that Teoscar does. He's obviously not better than that guy we signed in the offseason. So, for
Two
me,
games Springer, is that the guy?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, he still has more distance in home runs than Lourdes does. Because that one he hit went for days.
Yeah,
But the issue here for me is more or less, I think Biggio has been destined for left field for a long time on this roster. I think that's the position they're going to do. They need to trade Lourdes while they can get value, because you've got multiple outfielders or guys that are going to transition to the outfield coming, Biggio being one, Austin Martin being the other obvious one. So, you need to cash in on the capital and you need to turn him into a pitcher. And I think the length of his contract remaining is the right guy to trade. He's the worst defensively. He provides no power. He's not consistent enough in a hit tool scenario to be a guy you can lean on to get on base. So what value does he give you other than a couple hot streaks throughout the season?
He's got amazing hair.
He does have great hair. We can all agree on that.
Vanity metrics. Maybe he's got a lot of swagger. He's got
the Pina power.
Yeah, so he needs to pair up with CJ Wilson, get into those hit shoulders, right? Get into with the Polamalu crew and get it done. But it's obvious for me because I think Biggio becomes the bounce around guy, and I think I've said this before. I really believe we're going to see Jordan Groshans this season. I really think we're going to see him. On that prospect note, Nate Pearson did pitch tonight in Buffalo. 3.2 innings, 8 strikeouts, 73 pitches as they ramp him back up. He will be an addition to that Blue Jays rotation very shortly.
Yeah, I was
headed
just gonna say,
to the
give
waiver
him
wire
mid-May.
in my redraft leagues. Headed to the waiver
perfect.
wire immediately.
I would certainly say give him 2 more rotation spots and give the Jays 2 more weeks, and they'll probably want him up. But I feel like they'll do it where they're gonna give him a repeat performance at 90 plus pitches in Buffalo before they do that. Austin Martin, also speaking of Jays prospects, did have, I think it was a dinger in his first at bat, his first pitch as a pro. At least it was a hit. It was something. He did a good thing with a baseball when he had a bat in his hand, and that was fun. But for me, I'm back on this issue. I'm picking Biggio to be roster fodder, sadly, and that has more to do with the fact that he needs to go back to that AA approach he had when he had 20 dingers and a bunch of steals and other things. But the eye wasn't the sole focus where he was just taking a million pitches and forcing strikes. He needs to be able to hit the ball in different spots in the zone. Espinal is Ryan Goins, and that's a good thing because it's good to have a guy like that around. And when he does hit well, it's a bonus. But I don't want Espinal as a regular, especially not at third base. We need a power hitting guy at third base. And as Ty said, he's not on our roster today. I just don't know that it's going to be Groshans. I'm just saying I don't like the third base as I see it. And to me, Lourdes is a great guy to start moving around because of that pedigree, that ability to play major league infield and move him. And as well, like Ty said, he's not necessarily providing you with a lot of pop here, great defense here. So he can be moved around. And when he's hot, you get him in the lineup. And when he's not, it's not like you're hurting your team to have him withheld. It's just that what the team needs is not on the roster. It's healthy Springer for sure, because you need to be able to force the hand of who are the 8 core guys. Who are they when you're all healthy? what is it? Because even for fantasy owners, for ourselves, Biggio is captivating. In salary leagues, he's typically going to be, depending on your league, he's going to be on a third contract, or he's going to be on some value contract where you cannot put him in the minors, but he's not getting it done for you in categories leagues. And you got to do something. And then, I mean, for the Jays themselves, they need to get the outfield somewhat solidified. So we know if it's going to be Grichuk and Wright, if it's going to be Teoscar, if it's going to be Springer, like we just kind of need to know. But the more these guys move around early in the season, the better it is for us fantasy owners because they pick up position eligibility.
That's right. Absolutely. And I mean, I think Groshans went 1 for 4 with 2 walks tonight in New Hampshire. So, like I said, I don't think Kevin Smith is going to be the reason he doesn't get a shot this season. So I'm going to stick with that. Biggio is destined for AAA if he continues on the path that he's on right now. We've got Forrest Wall and Palacio sitting in AAA. There's zero reason for Biggio to continue doing what he's doing at the major league level.
Yeah, this is a team that wants wins. Just
right.
like us fantasy owners, we want wins.
That's right. And just a reminder before we sign off here that Sunday, again, let's get fabulous. Make sure you're joining us for the Sunday live stream, live questions on the show. Now that we have the super fancy technology to pull those things off. So make sure that you join us for that. If you ask dumb questions, we will call you out on that. So bring smart questions. We will give you smart answers. But until then, Jonathan, thank you for joining us again to reshoot this episode. We look forward to many, many other chats in the future, both on Clubhouse. Make sure you head over, join the Toronto Blue Jays fan club on Clubhouse. Follow the 3 of us, which you'll find very easily if you're in that club. So get over there, follow the club, join as a member, and we will see you there. So until next time, Tyler, Rob, it's Dingers.